Good afternoon. People are starting to join in now. We've got quite a big group who've registered to attend this afternoon, which is great. Thank you for coming along. My name's Keith Ayers, as you probably know, CEO of Integro. I've been with Integro 44 years, been distributing DiSC in Australia for 37 years. So fair bit of experience and seen a lot of change over that time. When I started with DiSC, it was a paper booklet and we needed a magic pen to score it. And so you'd color in these circles with a pen and symbols would appear and you'd add up the symbols and plot your graphs and everything. We've come a long way since then. The adaptive testing DiSC assessment we use today is light years ahead of that. And it's been great to be on the whole journey and seeing the whole transition from there to now. That's my profile on the right. So you can see where my dot sits. I'm in the S quadrant, but very close to the I. So it's an SI style. And I have an additional priority on action up on the DI scale up the top there. Okay, so the agenda for today, I don't know what level of experience people on this webinar have. So I'm not going to go too basic, but I'll start off very basic. What is DiSC? And then I'm going to take you through a couple of models that I always use when I'm taking people through their DiSC profiles. Always. I would never ever do a DiSC debrief. Even a one-on-one debrief, I would take them through these models here, because I think it really helps people to understand not only their profile, but understand themselves better as well. Okay. Now, one of the things that's really powerful to use in conjunction with the workplace or any profile, workplace management, sales, etc., is the supplement for facilitators. And it often surprises me that some people are not using it. All right. And so that's why I've sort of made it a key part of what I want to cover today, to reignite interest in DiSC. And even if people have done their DiSC profiles in the past and you haven't really got the best out of the supplement, doing a refresher session with the supplements can really reinvigorate people's interest in DiSC and understanding of their own profiles. All right. There's a range of support reports. If you're not using them, that's another opportunity for you to reignite people's interest in DiSC and start using it more effectively. But the biggest thing we've got today is Catalyst. And so I'm going to spend a bit of time. I'm going to take you into my Catalyst profile. If you haven't seen Catalyst yet, if you're not using Catalyst yet, that is the most valuable thing you can use to reignite DiSC and get people using it and using it on a regular basis. All right. So we're going to then wrap up by saying, well, how do we keep it alive by using all of these tools that we've got? Okay. So first of all, everything DiSC is a personal development assessment that measures an individual's tendencies and priorities. All right. So it's a personal development tool. All right. It's for the individual to understand more about themselves and to learn to grow. And growing comes from stretching. All right. And we'll talk about that when we look at the priorities a bit later. When you look at your DiSC map with the priorities around the outside, you can see which parts come naturally to you and what would take a stretch for you. Okay. All right. So the whole person concept. Have you ever noticed that no matter where you go, there you are? All of you. All right. You can't leave part of yourself at home. All right. And Maureen, the answer to your question, is it being recorded, is yes, and you will get a copy of the recording. Okay. So I know there's a lot of managers that would like their employees to leave part of themselves at home, mainly their feelings that could create problems. But the reality is when someone turns up work, the whole person shows up. All right. And so it's important to understand the whole person if we're going to be effective in dealing with and managing people. All right. So what we're looking at here is 4 aspects of a person. All right. And again, I'm going to emphasize again and again, if you're not using these tools, then you're not getting the value out of DiSC, because this really helps people understand their DiSC profile a lot. Okay, so the first aspect we're going to look at is behavior, right? Behavior is the most obvious part too, right? When you meet someone for the first time, you can see how they're behaving. You can hear what they're saying, all right? Which I'd put what people are saying up here with the behavior, all right? Verbal and non-verbal. So, but there's a lot more to people than that. And so we use the iceberg analogy here, that we know from what scientists have told us that 1/8 of the ice floats above the waterline. There's the biggest mass of it is underneath the water, all right? And we think people are like that. Right? What you can see on the surface is just a very small part of that person. And you know that yourself. You know that people can only see so much of you, all right? And obviously there's certain things about you that you want to keep hidden below the surface, at some times anyway, all right? But if we're going to understand the behavior, we need to go below the waterline, because it's what's going on down there that's causing the behavior, all right? So just below the surface, we have the thinking, feeling aspect. People doing what they think they should do or what they feel like doing. And we're doing that all the time. Everything you do because you think you should do it or because you feel like doing it. You just react to situations. Now, laughter is a good example, right? If you see something funny, you laugh. You don't filter it. It just comes out. But if you were in a serious meeting at work and you looked out the window and saw something really funny, and it's a very serious topic, are you going to burst out into laughter in front of everybody, and everyone look at you and say, what are you laughing about? This is serious, okay? So chances are your thinking would cut in and suppress the feeling of wanting to laugh, okay? So thinking and feeling are working together, which is why we have them together in this aspect. And both thinking and feeling are driving behavior, all right? If we go deeper down into our iceberg, we have our values and beliefs. Actually, values or beliefs. Your values about what's right or wrong, or what you should or shouldn't do, how you should live your life, are your beliefs about what's right or wrong, what you should or shouldn't do, all right? And you learnt them somewhere at some time, but you learnt them and they became solidified in a sense, because your beliefs are thoughts that became a fact, right? That's true, that's not true, that's right, okay? And you make your decisions based on your values and beliefs. You filter it through thinking and feeling, and then it comes out in your behavior, all right? And then deeper down in this iceberg, we have needs, right? And we could put the whole of Maslow in here, but I want to focus more on psychological needs when we're looking at DiSC, okay? And so the reason we use this model is that DiSC is a needs-driven behavioral model, right? The behaviors that people use because of their behavioral style are behaviors that satisfy their psychological needs. And in most cases, and for a lot of people, those needs are not conscious. They're just subconsciously being driven by these needs to do certain things, because doing those things will satisfy the need. Now, that's a big aha moment for a lot of people. It's an important lead into DiSC, to position DiSC, right? Because DiSC is a needs-driven behavioral model. By understanding your DiSC style, you'll understand what your needs are. And when you understand what your needs are, you're in a better position to go ahead and get them satisfied in a more effective way, all right? Have you ever been working with someone who's whinging all the time because their needs are not being satisfied? They're unhappy, all right? Well, maybe they should look at their behavior, right? Because if their needs are not being satisfied, they're not behaving in a way that will get those needs satisfied. Okay, and that's another thing that I think is valuable about this whole person concept, that people need to and can take responsibility for satisfying their own needs by making sure they behave in a way that will get it done. All right, so the next model is the DiSC theory model. All right, and this is another model that I always use, but this is the circumplex version. And for those of you that did this training ages ago, or maybe with someone else, you would not have got this version of DiSC theory, all right? And why this is important is that the circumplex DiSC profiles, which are the everything DiSC profiles, which first came into being in 2007 and have been coming out and evolving since then, are all based on the interpersonal circumplex. All right. Now, this is a graphic out of the Everything DiSC manual, where there's a chapter that talks about the relationship between other psychological models and Everything DiSC. All right. Now, the interpersonal circumplex was first developed in the 1950s. Professor Timothy Leary was one of the key creators of this model. He was more famous for his experiments with LSD than he was for the interpersonal circumplex, unfortunately. But basically, what we're looking at here is how people interact with each other. And he was observing the students at the university, and he noticed that their behaviors could be mapped against agency and communion. All right, agency meaning power or control, and communion being affiliation with others. All right, and so if you've got a strong need for affiliation, you're at the tendency to love end of that scale. And if you're got a low need for communion or affiliation, that is, you don't need to be around people much, have a tendency to ignore. All right, and then on the vertical scale, if you've got high need for power or agency, you have a tendency to dominate, and low need tendency to submit. Now, that's not language that we would typically use today. All right, in fact, we don't. But just to transition from those of you would be familiar, I'm sure there's people here familiar with DiSC Classic. It started with this when it was DiSC Classic, or maybe even before that. But in the early 2000s, a psychologist working with what is now Wiley noticed through doing some data analysis that the words that were being used to score the DiSC Classic profile, when mapped against control and affiliation, formed a circumplex. All right, so you can see there's actually words there that actually measure almost every degree in the 360 degrees of the DiSC map. Now, what was important about that, what came out of that, was that there's words that are used. If you look on the left-hand side of this model here, you'll see adventurous, energetic, high-spirited, etc. In the middle of that scale between D and I. All right. So some of those words might be used to score I if you were only measuring the 4 dimensions, and some might be used to score D. But in actual fact, it more accurately measures DI. All right. And the words in the middle of the top measure DC, and the bottom measure IS, etc. Okay. So out of that came Everything DiSC with 8 scales. All right. And that's how it came about. So I just thought I'd share that little graphic with you to say that's why we need 8 scales to accurately measure a person's behavioral style. Just measuring D, I, S, and C doesn't cut it. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the DiSC theory model and the interpersonal circumplex. And on the horizontal scale, we have the need for affiliation. So some people have a very low need for affiliation, some people have a very high need for affiliation, and we all fit somewhere on that scale. Right. So if we have a high need for affiliation, we will affiliate. We'll seek out people to interact with. If you have a low need for affiliation, you will detach from people, right? Because you don't need to affiliate with people. Why? Because your needs are met by doing something task-oriented or research-based or technical, etc. Okay. And people are a nuisance when you're trying to concentrate on a spreadsheet. Right. You can all relate to that. Okay. And so, so we all sit somewhere on that scale. And the Everything DiSC profiles are actually designed to measure where you sit in this model. We'll see that in a moment. The vertical scale is the need for control. And we're talking about control of others, right? So people with a high need for control take control. People with a low need for control adapt to those who are taking control, all right? Unless they don't trust the person who's taking control, in which case they'll avoid the whole situation, all right? But there's nowhere on either of these scales that's the right or wrong place to be. What's right for you is where you are, all right? But there's no right or wrong or good or bad place to be. And so this is, remember, this is the interpersonal circumplex. This is how people behave when they're with others, when they're interacting with others, or when they're trying to not interact with others, when they're detaching. Okay, and this starts very early in life. You think a group of kids going out into a park with a ball or a bat and ball to have a game. the kid with the highest need for control is likely to say, I'm in charge, you're on my team, you're on my team, you're on my team. Okay. If there's another kid with an equally high need for control, they'll argue, no, she's on my team, right? But the kids with a lack of low need for control, they just go along. They just want to be picked. They just want to play, all right? And probably the kids with a low need for affiliation aren't even out in the park, right? They're at home doing something more interesting to them, okay? So that's the interpersonal circumplex background to everything DiSC. And so D, I, S, and C fall into the 4 quadrants, okay? And so remember I said DiSC is a needs-driven behavioral model. So underlying all of that, there's the need for control and need for affiliation, but the needs get more specific as we look at each of the styles. Remember I said we were talking about psychological needs when we looked at the iceberg model, all right? So the need behind D, behavior, is achievement. And we know that because you just watch their behavior. They set goals, they create plans, they execute plans, they achieve goals, and then they're on to the next one, and then on to the next one. All right. And it's not just at work. They've got plans for what they're going to do around the house on the weekend. They've got plans for what they're going to do when they go on holidays because they want to achieve something. All right. It's a psychological need. Now, the fear is not failure, which is the first thing that most people would think. It's actually loss of control. Because if someone else has control, that determines what they can achieve, okay? And again, I'm putting this into this context here in this session because if you haven't used this tool with the people you've taken through DiSC, this is another way of reinvigorating DiSC for them, and it'll really pique their interest because they can start relating it to themselves, right? The I style has an outstanding need for recognition, all right? How do we know? Watch them. They're very talkative. Right? Talkative, expressive, enthusiastic, outgoing, the kind of behavior that draws attention to itself, right? That's because of the need for recognition that's subconsciously driving that behavior. The fear is a loss of influence. People not paying attention, not listening to me, turning off, ignoring me, etc. Okay, would be their greatest fear. The S has an outstanding need for acceptance, right? To be accepted by others. How do we know? What's the behavior? Friendly, helpful, cooperative, love doing things for other people, all right? And being supportive of other people. And the kind of behavior that you just want to accept them. And so the fear for them is, you would probably think rejection. That's probably the psychological term you would choose, but that's not necessarily what's going on around in their head. What they're mostly worried about is what other people are thinking of them, disappointing others, hurting people's feelings is a real fear for them. And every time I talk about this, I'm reminded of a saying I heard many years ago that I loved, and it's very relevant here to this. We wouldn't worry so much about what other people thought of us if we realized how little they did. Right. And that's pretty true, isn't it? Okay. Other people don't think about us anywhere near as much as we might think they would. And especially for the S style. The C style has an outstanding need for correctness. Look at the behavior, gathering data, analyzing data, dotting I's, crossing T's, making sure everything's correct. Not only the need to be correct in what they do, but to do the right thing in terms of being polite, well-mannered, tactful sort of way, okay? And you would think that the biggest fear for them would be making mistakes. And they do not like making mistakes, but what is worse is someone else pointing it out. Okay, so criticism of what they do. All right. Now, there's 2 reasons why this is a really good tool to use or model to use, is to get people thinking about not only understanding their own needs and fears, but the people they work with. It just explains a whole lot. Why, when you ask a C-style person a question, do you get a pause? All right. Well, because they've got a need for correctness. So they don't want anything coming out of their mouth until they're absolutely sure it's correct. So they may need to think through that a bit, all right? So instead of getting impatient with them, you go, oh, okay, I understand now why it's going to take a bit of time. They need to make sure what they tell me is correct, okay? And so we could, I haven't got time to go through all 4 of them to describe that, but you can come up with your own examples of that. All right, so better understanding why people behave the way they do. All right, and so the other thing this is really useful for, everybody's into teaching emotional intelligence these days, or talking about it, or wanting people to be more emotionally intelligent. And the first step in emotional intelligence is self-awareness, isn't it? All right, we all know that. But sometimes people think that that's all there is to it, but it's not. We're not really emotionally intelligent unless we've learned to adapt our behavior and behave differently in a situation that's not comfortable for us, right? Well, if you look at this model, you can see where we get out of our comfort zone. Like for the S style, you know, they're friendly, helpful, supportive. They love doing things for other people. Fear disappointing others or hurting people's feelings. So they're going to be anxious about how they say things. So they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. All right. But there are times when they need to really be direct and give a straight answer. All right. Now, to do that, they need to move from the low need for control into the scale to the high need for control, and take charge and be direct and speak up and stand up for themselves. It also means being less affiliative. So for the S style to move up to the D quadrant, they've got to move along both scales. It's not moving diagonally, it's moving both scales at the same, well, you're doing it at the same time. So you're going diagonally, but mentally you'll be more effective at adapting if you recognize that I need to take control here and I need to be less friendly and affiliative. All right, I need to detach from the emotional stuff in order to use that dominant behavior. Okay, and likewise for the D coming in the other direction, I've got to let go of control and be more affiliative. For the I to use more C behavior, I've got to let go of control or trying to influence everybody and concentrate on the detail. All right, so detach more from the feeling stuff and get into the detail. All right, so this DiSC theory model can really help us to help people increase their emotional intelligence by being aware of where I am and the reasons why I am there, because of the need and the fear, and that it's going to kick in the fear for me to move away from my comfort zone. All right. So all right. So let's. I'm just going to check. I'm just going to see if. Yes, Narelle, you can. The question is, can we have this slide to add to our personal decks? And yes, this one and the whole person concept I'll be making available for you to add into your own decks, and it'll build just like I've built it here. So, okay, the next thing I want to take you through is the supplement for facilitators. All right, and as I mentioned earlier, it frequently surprises me how often I come across people who, even they've been through accreditation or certification in the past, and they've been through the supplement, that they're not using it. And I hope it's not because they don't understand it, but let's understand it. Okay, so the supplement for facilitator report has 3 sections. The first section is your umbrella graph. And that's my umbrella graph on the left there. And the whole purpose of the umbrella graph is to determine where your dot sits. In other words, your style assignment. All right. So you can see where my dot sits on the right-hand side. And if you look at my umbrella graph, you can see that that dot sort of sits in the biggest part of the umbrella. Now, what skews it a little bit is that spike on the DIID scale. Okay. Now, the umbrella graph is the raw scores I've got on each of the 8 scales. All right. And you can see I've scored almost nothing on D, DC, C, and SC. I've got a moderate amount of I, but I've scored right out to the maximum on S, ISSI, and DIID. And so the program, using a series of algorithms, determines where my dot's going to sit. Okay, so so that's the purpose of the umbrella graph, and it's very valuable to look at this. It helps people understand their own profiles, right? So I can see where my dot sits. If I didn't see my umbrella graph, I wouldn't realize how strong my score is on DIID, because it's not going to show up in my workplace profile, is it? All right. So it does show up as an extra priority, but it doesn't come from the umbrella graph, and I'll explain why in just a moment. Now, the most interesting part of the supplement for facilitators is the unexpected items. Now, these are items in the questionnaire that I've responded to in a way that's not expected for someone with my style. All right, as it says in the text there, they're not correlated with my SI style. Okay, so how this program felt, it's helpful to know this. How does it get these unexpected items? Well, first of all, the program starts where my dot is and goes straight across 180 degrees to the DiSC CD scale. And it says, did Keith agree with any items on that scale? Because I'm not expected to, all right? And I did. I am patient with incompetent people. People on the DiSC scale are the most insistent about competence of any style, all right? And they get very irritated with people, impatient with people who they see as being incompetent. All right. There's a few others there that I tend to be questioning, etc. But there's room for 10 items in this unexpected items report. All right. And it's not going to find 10 on this scale because I scored hardly anything on that DiSC scale, if you can recall my umbrella graph. So what the program then does is looks to the two scales either side of that one opposite my dot to see if I agreed with any items there. Now you can easily pick out things like accuracy is a priority for me. I'm analytical, I'm precise. They're the C items, all right? It bothers me when people waste my time. I'm not easily impressed. I can be pretty forceful with my opinions would be D items. Now, I'm not interested particularly in identifying which items are which scale. That's not really important. It's just that they all come from the three scales opposite here. If there's a 4 or a 5 in brackets after it, which all of mine are. The 4 means I agreed with that item, and the 5s mean I strongly agreed with that item. Okay, and there's my unexpected items report. Now, some people will have a 2 or a 1 in brackets after some of these items. Now, how that works is if I had 1 or a 2, it's because when it went over here, it didn't get 10 items opposite me. So it came back to where my dot was and said, did Keith disagree with items he's expected to agree with? And if I disagreed, it would be a 2. And if I strongly disagreed, it would be a 1. Okay, so that's the unexpected item. Now, this is really valuable if you use it effectively. And again, this is where if you've used the supplement for facilitators and you haven't gotten the most value out of it, this is the way you're going to get more value out of it. Right? First of all, we're going to look back to page 4 in my workplace profile, which is the page that says your dot tells a story. Right, it's a narrative report, and we always ask people to personalize that. So go through and tick the things you agree with, put a cross on things you don't agree with, and on a question mark anything you're not sure about. All right, and so when we get to the supplement report and these unexpected items, we're now going to go back to page 4. So did we disagree with anything there? All right, so here's a cutout from my page 4, and I've highlighted the things that I didn't agree with. All right. Now, I probably dislike rapid, unpredictable change. It doesn't really fit for me. And then if you think about my DI scale score on the umbrella graph, that's probably why. But this next piece, I actually put a cross on this that you may be hesitant to move ahead with bold changes if you're unsure that everyone is on board. Right. And then when I go back to my unexpected items, you can see that I said it really bothers me when people waste my time. So I'm not likely to be hesitant to move ahead. And I can be pretty forceful with my opinions. Okay, so that would be an indication as to why did I disagree with that in my report. And then I've got one more example of that, and that is you may have found that you're so accepting that you can get yourself into trouble by trusting people who don't deserve it. And in my unexpected items, I do tend to be more questioning of people than accepting. And I'm not easily impressed. I used to be, not so much anymore, right? And so what this does is if people said, well, I disagreed with some things in my report. Oh, I can see why now, because I chose these unexpected items, and that's why I don't agree with that bit there, okay? People still basically agree with 80 to 85% of page 4. But it's those other little things in there, and when they pick up on these unexpected items, it really helps them see the whole thing come together really well. Now, the other third part in the supplement for facilitators is the priority scoring and shading, and that's in the priority subscale graph, okay? And this is how you scored on each of the 8 priorities that are around the outside of the circle. And this is where my striped shading and extra priority and action comes from. All right. So if you have a priority that's not one of your allocated 3 that scores above 78%, you will get the stripe shading as I have here. Okay. So, and again, that's something that 32% of people roughly get one additional priority. 3% of people get 2 additional priorities. Okay. All right. So just one thing, a little practical tip here that might be helpful for you is best practices for when someone says they don't agree with their results. All right. So first thing I would do is take them through the supplement for facilitators. And it may simply be that they disagree with a few things on page 4, but now you've shown them their unexpected items. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. Okay, put the two together and I've got the complete whole. Okay, we can also revisit the cornerstone principles and remind them that all styles are equally valuable and no style is better than any other style. Okay, maybe they've got a bit of a prejudice against some behaviors or bias towards some behaviors, and they didn't come out with that. Personalize the profile, tick, cross, question mark, etc., or highlighter. Ask a friend to read it. Ask them about their frame of mind when taking it, were they focused on a specific situation or more, thinking about themselves as a person. And if they still disagree, we might consider them taking the session, the assessment again. Okay. All right, support reports. There are 4 support reports that you can use to reinvigorate DiSC. If you haven't used these reports, we'll talk a little bit about how do you use them. And so first of all, the team view report is a very basic report. It just gives you a little snapshot of each person on the team. The advantage of this is it's free, but you don't get a lot of information other than where each person's dot is. Okay. The group culture report gives you a report on a group of people, and it does not include anybody's names, but it does tell you about the culture of the group. So here we have a group that's 41% C, for example. And so we'd go to the culture pages. I've only got examples of the D pages here. So the D culture rewards this, it criticizes that, the advantages this, drawbacks that. Issues to consider, right? How does the D culture support and inhibit the success of this group? Does your group take the time to calculate risks, etc.? Okay, some really good questions. So, and then there's a second page. So there's 2 pages about each of the 4 styles that help you understand the culture and give you some really great questions to ask to get the group thinking about the impact that culture is having on the team. And maybe we need to adapt to the way we operate to create a culture that's healthy for everybody. Okay, the facilitator report. This is something that anytime we're running a session for a group of people, we run this report. Okay, it gives us the same map in terms of where people are. It also gives us the same group culture report information with 2 pages for each of the 4 styles to what you can do the same exercises around culture with the group. The big difference is it does include people's names. So we know who's in what style. That's just generally what quadrant they're in. But then there's also this map, which shows you where each person sits and what their style is. Okay. So great team building activities in that, and particularly talking about the discussing the questions around group culture, etc. Okay, the comparison report. I hope you're using this. This is one of the most valuable tools for reinvigorating DiSC. All right, because anytime a new person joins the team, run a comparison report with that person and every other person, and have them sit down and go through their comparison reports. We've got a new team member starting in a couple of weeks, and that's one of the first things we'll be doing is running a comparison between Pam and everyone else on the team, and each person will sit down with Pam and get to know each other and get to know the differences in their styles and so on. Okay. All right. So this has 9 continua in it, 9 scales that are being measured, and plots where each person sits on each of those. But the report will only show 6, the 6 that are most relevant for these 2 people, right? And the first 4 will reflect differences, and the last 2 will reflect similarities. Okay. So here's an example of 2 this is Kelly and I, Kelly from Integra. I'm sure most of you know Kelly or speak to her regularly. All right. And I'll just show you, I'll come back to that. I've got that on another slide. Built into each comparison page is discover where you sit on the scale. All right. Personalize it. Tick, cross, question mark, the little boxes. These are my tendencies, these are Kelly's tendencies. And then the apply section, which is what are the potential roadblocks? What are the potential benefits of the difference? And here are some tips for me in working with Kelly. And of course, Kelly's tips for working with me would be something different from that. But basically, we'd have matching reports, but the flip side or the mirror image. Okay. All right. So here's where Kelly and I sit on the DiSC map. Right. And you can see we're very close together. Okay. We're both in the S quadrant, right? But then when you look at where we sit on the continua, the last two I showed you were at complete opposite ends, and here we are at complete opposite ends, and that drills down into the detail there. And then at the back of the profile, we can write up some action steps to take. Okay, all right. So there's a whole range of other tools that can be added to Reigniting DiSC, and all of them come with facilitator kits. Okay, and so that is something I would encourage you to look at. But I did say that the one thing that I really wanted to bring your attention to was Catalyst. Okay, now to have a look at that, Natasha has asked, will the two reports come together? Yes, when you generate a comparison report, it generates both reports. When you take workplace profile on Catalyst or upgrade an existing DiSC profile to Catalyst, you'll come to this page automatically. When you put a new person through everything DiSC workplace on Catalyst, this is what they'll come to. All right, they will get to see their profile straight away. Okay, and I know a lot of people have some concerns about that because we've taught you for years, don't show them the report until you're ready. But that actually works extremely well. And if you're doing working with an online profile, you can't send it to them at the right time for them to just get it. And even if you do, when they get the report or they open the Catalyst profile and you're trying to run them through a session, they're distracted because there's so much stuff to look at here. Okay, so here's my Catalyst profile, learning more about my style. So this is just all the information that's in the workplace profile, right? So you can see there's my story, and then down the bottom of that, there's a podcast. Well, there's the cornerstone principles and a podcast. Okay. If I scroll down a little bit further into my workplace profile, then I'll find what drives me. All right. And what drives me are my priorities and my motivators and stressors. Okay. So again, it's all here live. But there's so much more to do in here than you can do in the paper profile or a PDF file, I should say. Okay. Back to home. And because of time, I can't take you through everything here, but I just want to show you something that's really magic in here. All right. You and other styles. This is pages 8, 9, 10, and 11 in the workplace profile. Right, and build better relationships is pages 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so all of the application information in the workplace profile is on here. But if you go into you and other styles, it will actually show me some little videos about each of the styles, so I can get to learn a bit more about them, how they would deal with certain situations. We've also got the management profile on Catalyst now. I'll come back to that in just a second. Agile EQ is also on Catalyst, but the most valuable part of Catalyst is your colleagues. All right. So I already showed you my comparison with Kelly. In Catalyst, I don't need to produce a PDF file. All right. I just click on Kelly, and everyone in my team is available to me in my Catalyst profile. All right. I'm not getting her profile, but I'm getting the comparison between us. All right. And now this is something that Kelly cares about these things, and pull Kelly in when I need people with these skills, right? And also be aware that Kelly might be stressed by having to do these things, all right? And so don't do that, is the thing. So some people express a bit of concern about other people being able to see them on their Catalyst report. But if you think about it, why wouldn't you want people to know what you care about and when they should pull you in, what your strengths are? Okay, there's nothing there that people wouldn't want you to know about. In fact, even wanting people to know what stresses me. All right, so don't do that, and it's going to be much better for me at work. Now, getting down further in our comparison, we can see Kelly's and my priorities there. And what's interesting is Kelly's dot is opposite my extra priority. All right, her dot's down here and I'm up here. Her extra priority is opposite my dot. And that's why we were so opposite on so many of the continua. So these are our similarities and differences. As you can see, a lot more differences than similarities, even though our dots are pretty close together. And then here are the continua that appear in the comparison report. But there's 8 of them in total in here. All right. If I want to look at something where we're most different, say private outgoing here, I click on the details, and here are the tendencies that come up in the PDF file of the comparison report. But it's here live for me. I'm going into a meeting with Kelly, and let's see the application part down the bottom. All right. So working together, connecting. I want Kelly's buy-in. All right. There are 2 continua that are relevant to my getting her buy-in. One is I'm very accepting, Kelly's very skeptical, so I need to take that into consideration. And I'm very focused on possibilities, and Kelly is somewhat focused on realities. Again, we're opposite there. So these are the benefits and the roadblocks, and here are the tips for what I need to do in order to get Kelly's buy-in. All right. So that's the most valuable part of the Catalyst platform, is that the other thing that where that can come in then is if you go back, I'm just going to go back up here to the management. So we'll go to the management profile here, all right, and you've got a manager who's got all members of his or her team are already in Catalyst, right? They've done their workplace profiles, and the manager's done the management profile. So the manager can say, well, I'm really concerned about one of my team. They're not very motivated. So I click on motivation, and it's going to come up with the information that's in the management profile about the environment I tend to create, and looking at when that might be motivational and when it might not be, right? And then I want to motivate somebody, so I click on, and it's going to find anyone in my team who has a Catalyst profile, and I found Mel. All right, so now I can. Mel has a blend of S and I styles, tends to be more toward S. Start with the S style to learn more. So then I would go into, how do I motivate the S style? All right, and so you have a really practical tool for managers to learn to direct and delegate more effectively, to motivate and to develop their team members using Catalyst as a platform for doing that. Okay, just so that you can see another real benefit of Catalyst. These are the Epic credits used to generate the profiles, right? The workplace is 15, management 25, Agile EQ 25, and productive conflict 20, if done through the Epic platform, right? If you use Catalyst, upgrading your workplace profile to Catalyst is free. If you take workplace on Catalyst from scratch, it's 15 credits, the same as if you took it through Epic. All right. But if then you add your management profile to your workplace on Catalyst, which I did, and you saw it there in my Catalyst platform, it's only 10 credits instead of 25. I've also added the Agile EQ profile, which instead of 25 credits, when done in Catalyst, is only 10 credits. All right. So there's a significant saving in doing those profiles in Catalyst, but you have to have done the workplace profile on there first. Okay, productive conflict is slated to be the next profile on Catalyst, but it's not available yet. But when it does come, it would make sense that they would be making that available at 10 credits as well. Okay, there is also a Catalyst facilitator kit. And all the facilitator kits, if purchased individually, are $1,600, like management, workplace, Agile EQ, etc. But the Catalyst kit is free to upgrade from the other kits, and it includes the kits for workplace, Agile EQ, and management now. Okay, so I'm going to pause there, and I see we've already got some comments in the chat box, and we've got a few questions. I'm going to deal with the questions first. Will the two reports come together? We already answered that one, Natasha, about the, I'm assuming that was the comparison reports. Will all new profiles now have the catalyst automatically? No. You have to select catalyst. So when you select, if you wanted to have someone to do a workplace profile, you would go into your Epic account as normal, and to set them up to do a workplace profile, but you choose workplace on Catalyst instead of just workplace, right? And then it would automatically put it into Catalyst. Okay. When you want to add the management profile to that, you have to actually select it, work management on Catalyst, etc. And then it will add it to the Catalyst platform. And the next question is, do you now suggest introducing the DiSC theory before doing the survey so they understand the theory before they receive the results? My answer to that would be a definite no. And the reason is people will start, some people may start thinking, oh, I don't want to be an S, I want to be a D or something like that. And then they'll try to answer the questionnaire in a way to get the result that they want. I just want people, when they're answering the questionnaire, first of all, to understand there's no good or bad result that can come out of this. The most accurate result is to let people find who they really are. So when they're responding to it, think about who you are as a person rather than you in any particular situation. All right, just overall, who are you as a person is the most accurate. And because if my profile tells me where my home base is, right, then I know what my natural tendencies are. I also know what direction I need to move in order to adapt. All of these reports can be generated, all of the support reports can be generated on Epic, all right? And I love that new employees can now view the comparisons themselves within Catalyst. It's a great portal, absolutely, totally agree with you there. And see, that's what they started off calling it Catalyst it's a catalyst for culture change. All right, and in order to change the culture, you've got to establish values, beliefs, and behaviors that are consistent with the new culture. And when you look at the values, beliefs, and behaviors behind the idea of Catalyst in the Your Colleagues section, it's understand each other, accept each other, value the differences, value the strengths of each other, learn more about each other. That's the kind of culture you want to create. Well, then Catalyst is a great tool for you. All right. So do you recommend using Catalyst instead of myeverythingdisc.com? Yes. Short answer. And the reason is you don't have to ask people for comparisons, they're already there, but there's a lot more, there's a whole lot of videos and stuff in Catalyst. I didn't get a chance to show you where they were, etc. But yeah, and it's Catalyst is less clunky than my Everything Disc. Yes. Oh, that's Kelly. Yes, you're right, Kelly. I'd love to chat with you about that. Yes, please do. And yes, there's new functionality being added to Catalyst all the time. And as I mentioned, there's plans for new profiles to be added there. The question, how do you address the "but I'm a very different person at work compared to at home with my friends" comment? It's not a different person, it's different behavior. All right. Who you are as a person doesn't change. But yes, we would expect people to behave differently at home, relaxed with friends, that they might in the work environment. Okay, and especially if the work environment requires you to adapt more. So that's that's the official Wiley response to that as well. What do you recommend for a best practice follow-up coaching session with participants? The second meeting, first being when you take them through the profile. Depends how much time you've got on the first meeting. The other question I would have other people in their organization or their team done everything DiSC. If you've only just taken them through the profile, then the second meeting I would take them through the supplement and make the connections back between the unexpected items and page 4 in the report. If you've already done that, then I would be introducing them to the comparison report and getting them to do comparisons with teammates and stuff like that. Okay. The supplement is not provided on Catalyst at this point in time. All right. There's some new functionality being built into it We have no idea when it's going to come. Sometime this year, yes, I would hope, but there will be some of the supplement being brought in as well. Okay. Rob's asking if we can guide him shifting a client onto Catalyst, about 10 people. Yeah, it's pretty easy, Rob. The biggest difficulty is getting people to actually go and do it, because they've got to answer a few more questions. So they've got to click on a link. And Genty, just to clarify there, if you deploy a Catalyst survey, you won't get the supplement in the actual report in any way, but you can still go into Epic and generate the supplement for facilitator report from a Catalyst profile. So you don't lose the information. And yes, you can download a PDF file from your Catalyst profile. And it actually has 3 or 4 more pages than a normal workplace profile, just to tie in with the new facilitation that they created around Catalyst, which is in the Catalyst Facilitator Kit. But you'd still have to go back into Catalyst to generate a supplementary report for the people who are on Catalyst. But it's easy enough to do. It's the same as generating a Catalyst profile. Sorry, a supplement from any other profile. Okay, thanks for coming. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And if you have any other questions that come up, please let us know. We've got an office full of S-style people here who just love being supportive. So help us out. See you soon. Bye.